can a critical digital literacy pedagogy? Now that might be an entirely new term for a lot of you, and Jeanette can fill you in a little bit more on that later. So how can a critical digital literacy pedagogy, including a social networking site, so like Facebook, facilitate the development of positive and agentive literacy identities for ELLs? Okay? So we wanted to figure out how can we make the students feel like they're literate individuals so that they feel like they want to participate in the classroom. So then our second question was, how does the development of a literacy identity online impact an English language learner's social presence in their classroom learning community? Okay, so how does, when they're online and they develop these connections with their friends, they develop these literate identities, how does that translate into the classroom, the physical classroom? So the framework, you can just pull them all up. So CDL pedagogy, this is something that, a term that Jeanette's coined, so she can give you some more information about that, but it's essentially the intersection of critical and digital literacies. We also drew on Wenger and Laven Wenger's communities of practice and legitimate peripheral participation, these affinity spaces, Garrison's social presence, and there's a couple more, and social networking sites in education. And literacy and identity. So how does literacy impact identity development? How does identity development impact literacy? So for our methodology, it was a mixed methods approach. So quantitative surveying, we did pre and post surveys and case study analysis. And it was a cross case study comparisons, and we used content and discourse analysis. So for the context, you can just bring all of them up as well. So we had 3 different grade 6 classrooms. This totaled 78 students, so it was a huge number of students, a lot of data to go through. They were at that age where they're just starting to figure out who they are and to understand identity and how to build identity. So this is a critical age. For our case study in particular, we chose 3 English language learners. Within the classroom, you can see in the picture there, each student had their own Mac or Apple laptop. They had ubiquitous Wi-Fi access, so we were using online programs, apps. The NING, which I'll talk about in a minute, that's a social networking site, and there might be one more. Oh yeah, and what we were doing with them focused obviously on identity development. So in the whole unit, it was all focused around the theme of identity. So what is the NING? I'm sure many of you know it, being in classes at UOIT, but just to give you a brief background, so the NING is a networking site. On the site, the students were able to, like Facebook, upload a profile picture, upload videos, photos, populate their profile pages. You can just bring all of them up at the same time. They could friend other people on the NING, so this is a great way to connect people. They could use the like feature, so if somebody posts a video, another student can go on and hit like. So there are all these kinds of ways that ELL and non-ELL students could connect and interact that wasn't necessarily face-to-face. There wasn't the same sort of pressures that you would have in a face conversation, or putting up your hand in class and being put on the spot to give an answer. Okay. The other thing about that, just quickly, is that they could create interest groups, and this was particularly important for students who didn't necessarily share their personality in class, but they wanted to say, hey, look, this is what I'm interested in. Come and join me here, and let's have a conversation about it. So basically, just to give you a bit of an overview of the design process. So I'm just going to flip to my page. Okay, so using the NING and various online and offline programs, the students learned about 5 genres of poetry, and this related to identity and identity construction. So the 5 genres included acrostic, free verse, postcard, limerick, and sound. So the students were required to read each of these different types of poems. With spoken word, they had to obviously listen to the poem and respond to it. So the responding included analyzing the major themes revolving around identity, and also the poetic devices that were in each poem. So they did this in informal think, pair, shares, whole class discussions, and individual reflections, which were posted to the NING. So the individual reflections were important because the students were able to interact on the Ning not only in these informal kind of social interactions, but also trying to use academic language in a more formal context. So they would upload a very reflective response to a poem, and then their peer would respond back to them. They would have this back and forth discussion. Okay, so for that, bring them all up. So we used the Ning activity. So we would go online daily, weekly at the end of the project and figure out what kinds of things the students were doing most often on the Ning, what kinds of poems they were uploading, multimodal tools they were using, the teacher observations and interviews. So the teachers had some really interesting insight. The student reflections, so what they posted on the Ning, and interviews with the English language learners. This was obviously difficult because they have some problems communicating, but we were still able to get through it. Content and discourse analysis of the student interactions and postings, and I'm not sure if there's, and the pre and post project surveys, and the student work. So we got some really interesting poems back from the students, especially the found poetry, because with found poetry, I don't know how many people are familiar with this, but it's not actually using your own words to write, it's looking around in your environment and taking the words and phrases that you see and putting it into a poem. So instead of an ELL feeling, oh my goodness, I have this blank piece of paper, I don't know how to write or what to write, you're looking in your environment and using the tools available. So for the case studies, just to give you a bit of an overview, so the Ning, obviously, it was an informal arena for the students to see how mainstream students or native speakers would interact. So they saw formal language, they saw informal language, they saw chat speak. So obviously there's a different language that's used when you text and you interact with people on the internet. We found that there was an increase in vocabulary, writing and communication skills, and social presence both on the Ning, and they were all over the Ning, and in the classroom. And the multimodal tool, this is what really helps the students communicate better, especially when we were using video and tools that they didn't necessarily only have to rely on verbal communication or written words. They could rely on a bunch of different tools to communicate what they were feeling. So the very first case study is a girl, we'll call her Farah, obviously a synonym. She was grade 6 of Iraqi descent. She was fairly quiet in the classroom, quite studious, but I got the sense from her that if she had more language and literacy skills, she would actually be more active in the classroom. So one of the first findings, through poetry and through the thematic focus of identity, she reported to us that she had an opportunity to explore her bicultural or hyphenated identity as an Iraqi Canadian. So she said in her interview, I learned about my Iraqi identity, and I learned about my Canadian identity too. I learned more things than I had. So it was a space where she was finally able to reflect on the fact that yes, she's Iraqi, but now she's in Canada, and she has this new identity, and what does it mean to be Canadian? What does it mean to be Iraqi Canadian? So she wrote quite a few poems that dealt with this kind of hyphenated identity. So it was also, being on the Ning for her, an opportunity for acculturation. So she says, I learned by my friends because they told me a lot about Canada and different types of things. So she didn't have the opportunity to interact with her friends in class and learn about Canadian culture. The Ning was a way, through the poetry that people posted, through the social interactions, through the pop culture, uploads of videos and photos and that kind of thing, she was able to get a little bit more of a sense of North American and Canadian culture. So in terms of the social, in informal discussions in the chat feature, she was able to really reach out and connect with people. She says, I'm shy in person. So she says, I'm shy, but like on Ning, I talk a lot and all that. And we noticed in the chat function, so there's, you can upload and you can have discussions with people, but there's also this little chat function where if you're online and somebody else happens to be online at home, you can say, hey, how's it going? And just start chatting back and forth. And she did that quite a lot. The second observation was that it spilled over into the physical classroom, and what was really interesting was when we sat down and had the interview with her, she actually says, she gives us an example. She says, I didn't talk to like Sally. She's my friend, like we're friends now. I didn't talk to her before, but then we talk on Ning, and we talk right now. And we noticed in the classroom that now she's friends with this individual. So I had one more case study, but I think I'm just going to finish up with this case study and do the conclusions so that we have enough time. So the last thing was how this impacted in the community of practice. So the first, there was an increased participation in literate activities. So she says one of the types of poetry we did was postcard poetry, and she reported, I liked the postcard poetry because it had like pictures, and we could write beside the pictures, and that's what I really liked about it. So instead of just, like I was saying before, writing out a whole poem, she was able to combine images, the words that she was comfortable using, familiar with, and present some sort of feeling or emotion or idea. And then the last was, there was an exchange of ideas within this community practice. And she says, I think when I post things that I think they're right, it's right. So my peers comment, and I see what they think, and we could like get to know each other better because I know what they think and they know what I think. Before, I'm sure she probably didn't have a lot of in-depth conversations with people in the physical classroom about beliefs, values, ideas, that kind of thing. But on the Ning, especially through the combination of informal activities but also the formal academic activities, there was this opening of an exchange of ideas. So Benji was another kid, but we'll go through him for another day. So just in the discussion. So basically we found through this study that it's necessary to consider the students' backgrounds and experiences and how these can actually be leveraged in the classroom community. So in terms of wanting to engage them and helping to develop their literacy identity. The second thing was a co-construction of content and knowledge was beneficial in enhancing the student's social presence. So trying to move them from that legitimate peripheral participant role to a central role in the classroom community, which we've definitely noticed. And this is only over the course of 3 months. So if it could happen over the course of 3 months, imagine if it could be a whole year. Where we felt like we could have improved the study was that we could have used more writing scaffolding, so helping the students with sentence structure, even more with vocabulary, spelling, that kind of thing. We were focusing more on trying to get them to communicate as opposed to trying to correct. But we feel like if it was a longer study, we could incorporate that a little bit better. Also, we ran into some appropriate use issues at the very beginning. So the students would be online and maybe not really understanding how to properly interact with each other. So the teachers had to step in a little bit and kind of facilitate that a bit. So just in conclusion, you can just bring up all 3 points. So overall, for these particular 3 ELLs, we found that a critical digital literacies pedagogy helped them construct positive online literacy identities. And it was in constructing these identities, constructing these identities was a critical component in developing their social presence, so both on the Ning and also in the physical classroom. And for these students in particular, there were measurable gains in language, literacy, and an active involvement in the classroom community. So there you go. And I think I finished with 1 minute. Great. We were just wondering, because I've never heard of Ning before, so what is the seen that on Facebook and what? Okay. So, yeah, the Ning is, sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay, so the question was, what is the Ning? What's the difference between that and Facebook? And the biggest difference is that it's like an educational kind of social networking site. So a teacher can go in, set up a protected closed group, and so random strangers can't befriend. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. My question is, what was the nature of the coaching and facilitation on the part of the teacher through this process? And secondly, did you have any anecdotal evidence of what was going on outside of the classroom once they started picking up these linguistic proficiencies that come from? Like at home? Or just in the outside of the class interaction? Perhaps they were reflecting on this in their reflection. I'm going to give you an answer, and I'm not sure if this is actually answering your question. In Benji's case study, we had an interview from a teacher who was talking about how now he is prolifically interacting with his friends or new friends outside of the classroom. So he's now involved in like soccer groups and other social activities. So does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.